Phil Harris and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible fortnightly podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast.
A progressive, contemporary conversation on what it takes to be a dynamic thinker, leader, and role model.
Backed with over 2 decades of friendship, trials and tribulations that teach from real-world experience and what it takes to dream big, move fast. I think a life properly lived is just learn all the time. Charlie Munger. Phil, what are your thoughts on the late Charlie Munger's great quote here about learning and making that decision to really grow?
I think it's a really good one for you and I, Josh. I think that's probably one of the key things that's really brought us together is our appetite and our passion for learning. And it's interesting because when I was at school, Josh, I think I wasn't a great learner and I wasn't enthusiastic about that, but certainly I feel like my passion for education and learning grows stronger and stronger each and every single year. We're just talking before about some courses only a moment ago, but certainly a trend I would suggest that, as we sit here, you and I are going into some more training tomorrow, but for those friends of ours close in the industry, Josh, who seem to be succeeding, it's really the common thread is people who are passionate about learning.
The funny thing is that I think my Year 6 report card was something on the lines of, he's really good, he's just not that interested in school. And I kind of I think about you on a tennis court. You might not have been at school, but I bet you were pretty clear on the tennis court to want to learn some of those skills in the very early days, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. It's, I think learning really invigorated for me. Yes, I was very passionate about sport, absolutely. I was all in on learning, but the passion for me around learning outside of, tennis and outside of school is when I kind of linked passion with purpose, So when I was just at school, not knowing what I was learning for, there wasn't an intensity or a purpose towards that.
Yeah.
But the moment that I kind of found my craft in real estate, ever since day one, I've just been, just super passionate about just trying to get a little bit better each and every single day. And just, we're speaking before about other courses that we've done and other courses we've got planned for late this year. And I think that it's that old kind of Nike saying there is no finish line, that there is no destination to learn. It's just how do you get a bit better each and every single time.
And I know you and I both work with Peter Knight over in the UK, and Pete always said to me, he goes, man, how do you go with your reading? I'm like, sometimes I get a bit stuck. And he goes, man, have 5 or 6 books on the go. So if what you're reading right now is not stimulating, then you can jump onto something else. And if you go and do that, I think it makes a big difference. So it gets us into a really great one because today's all about growth, right? And we're going to talk all about, the challenges and the opportunities that come in and around that. And I love this about growth should be a really specific, strategic, explicit decision. And this is interesting because knowing as a business leader, knowing as a sales agent, knowing as a property manager, what does growth actually look like? And I think, property managers probably get really, really frustrated because their principals don't necessarily have a growth benchmark about a certain amount of revenue or a certain number of properties under management. Then that's when the next resource can come on. So that's probably not clear. In a sales environment, people kind of struggle about, the shared services model versus actually having a PA or versus actually having an agent, and are they a buyer's agent, and what does all of that look like? But also to understanding that you don't actually necessarily have to go for a significant amount of growth. One of your growth metrics might be, hey, can I do the same numbers as I did last year on a day less a week? So, getting very, very clear about it. And I think that the big lesson for me was always about 2 foundational principles about what we go to call layered growth and exponential growth. So, Phil, you know what? You're doing 30 transactions a year. How many are you going to do next year? And in the business planning session, you go, you know what, Josh, I'm going for 33, man, hell or high water. And that was about tweaking, I'd maybe put out an extra DL or do an extra call or something, right? And then you then start to think about exponential growth. But Phil, if you're at 30 transactions a year, how do we do 300? And when you start to think exponentially about that 10 times growth, everything breaks, right? Because at 300 transactions, oh my God, that's 30 sales a month. That's like 30 opens. How would I do 30 opens? I can't promise the vendor I'm going to be at every open. I'm going to need to have 4 salespeople in my team. And geez, how am I going to manage that? Well, I'm going to need an operations manager. And what you actually, I can't just work this small little section. I'm going to have a much bigger marketplace. And so all of a sudden, everything then starts to change when you start to think that way. What are your thoughts about some of that, about getting really specific about how much you want to grow and how that then creates a set of disciplines around activities and outcomes?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. 2 things that have really held me in good stead around kind of mapping your learning and mapping your growth, Josh, is having 2 real clarities. Number one is what is the actual long-term objective? So anchor yourself to what the long-term future looks like.
Yeah.
So whether that be from business perspective or if you're a salesperson or property manager, whatever that might be, what is the long-term anchor that you can really dial in on? Mm-hmm. And so for me, that'd be look at more of a longer-term vision. So where am I actually planning on being in 10 years' time? So let's say I'm a salesperson writing a couple $100,000. I say in 10 years' time I want to be writing $2 million, $3 million in fees or whatever that might be. Okay, that's the objective. Then what you want to do is you want to dial it back into the short term, which is really looking at what does the next 90-day project look like. And then inside those 90 days, as you said, what are those key metrics that you need to make as a salesperson? What are the things that you need to start with? And then from that 90 days, Josh, I'll be breaking that down to what is a successful day and then what does a successful week look like? And we know what those metrics are. So if you want to win in real estate as a salesperson, there are fundamentally some things that you need to achieve every single day when you put your head on the pillow at night. And if you can do that every single day, days stack into weeks into months, months into quarters, and the decades, for people like you and I, they add up pretty quick.
So, mate, quick question for you. How many weeks are there in a Phil Harris year?
How many weeks are there in a Phil Harris year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to get 8 weeks of leave. So I'm 52 less 8 but that's the time.
So that's 44. Yeah. That's good. And how many months are there in a Phil Harris year?
Well, I'd say 10.
Yeah, great. And so this is the whole thing. I had a lady say to me the other day, she goes, Josh, I can't do that. I'm like, why is that? She said, well, my employment agreement says I have 4 weeks worth of annual leave. How could I take 8? I said, well, this is the big shift about getting paid on results versus getting paid on time. So what you've got to do is you've got to start very differently. A life that's planned is going to be a great life. And you've got to start to think about how would I actually open that up. So, let's go and talk about that. We're going to concentrate on some sales stuff and then we'll do some PM stuff as we go through today. But growth from you to a team. I think that as an individual agent, that's a really simple thing. You're out there and probably capacity is like doing 2, maybe 3 and possibly 4 opens on a Saturday, and it definitely breaks at 5. But, you're going crazy and you're running, all sorts of things. And, when you first start out, do you remember when energy was your only leverage tool?
The only strategy you had was energy.
I'll do Saturdays, I'll do Sundays, I'll do late Mondays, late Tuesdays, late Wednesdays. In fact, I'm available all the time.
That was my first 10 years, I think.
Yeah. And then naturally you get burnt out at some point, right? Yeah. And you got to make some decisions about discipline around that. So, in terms of growing from you to actually growing into a team, what was the sort of first role that you think is really important for what you've seen with agents? And I get it does change too, because in an organization like yours, you've got a lot of centralized services that agents can tap into that can allow them to get some leverage. But, what does it look like? Who's the first person you normally put on and who's the second person you normally put on inside of that team?
Well, I think typically speaking, going back, when you and I were selling, Josh, I think typically it'd be an administration-based person.
Yeah, sure.
Because you just need that back-end resource to be able to grow. Whereas inside our organisation today, that's probably flipped a little bit.
Yeah.
And so the roles of the people that people put on first has changed. So we call it more of a co-agent.
Yeah.
Which is more of that kind of someone who's able to do a little bit of admin support, because our back-end office resource at Harris is doing the vast majority of administration for processing listing sales and copywriting and advertising, all those sort of things.
Yeah.
So you're wanting someone who can still process a listing or a sale, but at the same time, we're looking for a lead generator who's going to work next to that person, actually assist them in generating lead opportunities. They're also going to be heavily buyer focused, so doing a lot of buyer runs and buyer conversions. And then thirdly, really working those open homes and open home callbacks. So that's generally where that job description is going to go for that particular person. But the other key thing about going from me to we in terms of a growth perspective is, I think one of the traps that a lot of salespeople make in making that initial jump, Josh, is it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're going from one person to 2, or maybe you're a business owner right now and you're wrestling with, you've got 50 staff. Should I or should I not put on a sales manager?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are. Everybody's kind of got those reluctances to when is the right time to take the next step.
Yeah, sure.
But largely speaking, I think most salespeople probably go too late in terms of actually putting on a salesperson, because the reality is, every single time that you go to grow, so you're trying to build momentum. Most people have this thing in their head. They say, once I get to 5 or 6 deals per month, then I'm going to put on a PA, right? But if you're doing 5 or 6 deals per month, to get to that level without a PA, you're probably doing it with a level of carnage, where
you're burning out quality of life, energy,
you're burning out. Yeah. And so then what happens subconsciously, I remember hearing someone teach me this many years ago, is that what happens is when you're running that philosophy, like subconsciously, your subconscious is actually resisting growth, because you actually start to affiliate pain with growth.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah,
so every time your business grows, you're like, okay, well now I'm affiliating pain with that. Why? Because I've got some unhappy vendors, I've got some unhappy buyers.
Yeah.
And so largely, I think you've got to go earlier. So rather than growing into a system, have the system first, so that you take all the excuses away. So you actually have to upscale the size and the volume of your business.
Yeah, sure.
So all of a sudden, I've now got this infrastructure. I have got a co-agent, which means I'm now no longer doing that admin, and I'm no longer doing that workflow. I've got no excuse but to double down and focus on prospecting, listing, and selling. Everything else is taken care of other people. But I would say go a little bit earlier than a little bit late. I think that's the big mistake I see.
So we used to have like some metrics of 30, 60, 90. So every 30 or so transactions, that's probably the right time where the next person starts on inside of your team. And the interesting conversation about that is that like literally it's really important to understand the titling and the roles. So we don't call it admin. We like to go with operations.
Yep.
And ultimately what we want that operations to do is, depending on the shared services, but compliance, marketing, managing of the team, and running the people that are underneath you, because you're not going to have time to train and develop and go and do that once your business starts to really get up into that 100, 150, 200 plus transactions type territory. And so that's really where it starts to change. Like it's beyond just the compliance and the marketing stuff to now actually managing and running the team to make that highly effective. And what I would say to you is that literally the reason why you're putting it on a co-agent is not to generate leads and take that pain away. The reason you're putting it on a co-agent is so that you can scale from 6 to 12 open for inspections on a Saturday. So they need to be good enough to go into a listing lounge room. It's a holiday leave and holiday coverage and actually being able to get accessibility to high value stock and being able to do it. And there is nothing wrong with being in a team for 10 years plus. And that's one of the great challenges I think a lot of people make.
Another kind of quick thing I'll just add to that before we move on, Josh, is I still see a lot of people, they go to put on a PA and they're still sitting there 6 months down the track and we still don't have an appropriate job scorecard in place. We still don't have the appropriate checklist in place for every single function inside that business. So what's our just listed process? What's our appraisal process? What's our process when we've actually listed the property? What's our process from listed to launch? Like we've got all of these basic things that you don't need a PA to have those things organized and ready to go. It kind of perplexes me why agents are actually trying to build the plane while you're taking off the runway versus all of these tools, this whole suite of checklist and process and system and infrastructure. While you're now selling 2, 3, 4 homes a month and you've got a goal and a vision to have a team to put on your first person, this is when you're going to be working overtime to get all those things done. And the other thing I'd say is, well, like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel on this stuff. Like you should be, beg, borrowing, stealing all of the infrastructure for the checklist, the job description, the scorecard, the process, the playbook, the how to run a PA. You shouldn't be spending 12 months trying to establish and set that up.
Usually a lot of people burn out their first PA, right? Because they expose
first
all
2 or 3,
or they expose all the flaws in the business. When someone comes to you, so Phil, about that thing on Saturday, do we have to take a sold sticker to that because it's not going to sell? Yes, you have to. It's called the just sold checklist, and just in case a buyer turns up, we need to be ready. So our lesson is an important one when you start to think about the growth thing, really about who's that key person that you're going to need inside of the team. A little thing I do is I just get you to write on a little list what are all the things that you're currently doing right now that you should no longer be doing. It's an old school thing, stop, start, continue. Or love, dislike, and hate. What are the things you're currently doing that you love? What are the things you dislike? What are the things that you hate? Anything that's not in the dislike and hate column outside of what your core functional role is, like prospecting and listing, someone else in your team can go and do those functions. For example, we had a strategy last year called KJT. Keep Josh talking. Anything that wasn't me talking, someone else in the business had to go and do. And that's a really important part because this is where systems are really important inside of growing any business, that you've got to think about what those systems actually are. And a lot of people will underplay this because they think their CRM is their system, and it is a system, but it's not the system that's going to run the whole show. So what you got to think, okay, forms capture data and information. My best form of all time, agency agreement. My second favorite form, sales advice. Next one after that, checklist, getting things in the right order. So the other day I sold a property and then I got the agency agreement. Oh no, I got to do it the other way, don't I? Yeah. So you're actually making sure that you've got everything in the right order and nothing actually gets missed. And that's where you get great ideas in training and then they dissipate within 2 weeks because it's not actually put back into the checklist for what you're going to do every time now when you go around that listing, like things like 10, 10, 20. Beyond that, you then say, okay, great, forms, checklist, visuals. Visuals are like a diagram that can explain what actually happens next. So on the day of the auction, this is exactly what you're going to need to do. And that can show people a very complicated system in a very short period of time so they can understand the workflow. And then we then go to dialogue. And I often say to people, hey, what's the function of dialogue? What it's designed to do is to speed up the conversation and to increase the speed of conversion. So, when we used to have to go to scripts and dialogue sessions, oh my God, so bad. And what you got to start thinking about is that, hey, when I do an open home callback, hey, Phil, it's Josh. You came through Grace Street in Goodwood. Mate, I just thought I'd quickly check in. Would you like to see it again? No, I would not. Straight away they're not interested. Yes, I would. Okay, great. I can get you down tomorrow, 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock. Have you bought in Adelaide before? You have. And what are your plans for existing when you buy the next? You're going to sell it? How about I pop out to yours, give you an idea in the value and take you through the other one and let's see if we can get it to happen. Now you've just picked up a market appraisal, you've got a potential seller, you've got a potential buyer, you're going to put a deal together, and we're 3 questions in to that call.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've implemented inside our organisation going back a couple of years ago is, if you're employing someone into that role as a first time kind of what we call a co-agent, there's about 6 skills, Josh, that you need to have. And even though that like the language of real estate is extensive and learning all the processes and all the skills and all the system, that's all great. That will take some time to really get your head around the actual industry itself. But there's about half a dozen things that unless that person actually has qualified skill in that area, they're actually quite useless to the business. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you throw someone on and you make an assumption that someone just knows how to do an open home.
Yeah.
Like you put someone, you think they know how to do an open home callback. And by the way, there's not one open home callback. It's yes, I want to buy it. No, I don't like it.
Yeah.
Thirdly, it's a maybe. Fourthly, I might have an investment property. Fifthly, I need to convert. What are the basic things that someone should actually have, ready to go from day one? So things like being able to do an open home, things like how to do an open home callback, how to book a private inspection, how to actually take an appraisal call and book it. These are 5 or 6 things they should be learning on day 1 or 2.
Which I love because it links back into your conversation around a job scorecard, and I'm now calling that micro skills. So Phil's going to join my team. What are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 micro skills that would make him really valuable? So I'm not going to say negotiation because that's a really big heading. But what I am going to say, can he do an open home? Can he do an open for inspection callback? Can he enter someone into the CRM? Can he take an offer from a buyer? And where does he rate as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 out of 12? And if he's not 10, 11, 12 out of that, then what do I need to do to get his skills there? Once I've built those 5 key skills, then I'm going to go and add another 200 to that list. And the basic foundational concept is that every person of every level in every organization should have a job scorecard with their next set of micro skills of what they're learning to actually make sure they can improve over a period of time. And it's like literally this is a very mature industry. I'm not sure why we keep on trying to reinvent or think that we've got to go and change things to really get that. And I think the journey to growth is an important one because where I see a lot of this go wrong is about numbers, right? So I was listening to the great Jim Rohn from the 1970s the other day, and he said, show me the numbers and I'll tell you the story, right? And it's like, oh yeah, because how many people just give you the story? Oh, it's the market, and feel there's something wrong with the Barossa this week, and whatever.
Totally.
And you just go, no. So let me show you the numbers. So as an example, I do this thing with people. I go, okay, great. So how many sales do you want to do? Oh, I want to do 40 a year. Okay, great. Let's call it 4 a month. In order to sell for a month, how many do you need to list? Oh, well, 4. No. Because it relates to your clearance rate. If you're in that 80% clearance rate, which is amazing, then you're going to have to probably list 5 to sell for. Okay. And some markets, it's not like that. It's, you might have to list 8 to sell for because it's 60 days on market or the above. Let's assume I'm going to do 4 sales. That's 5 listings I'm going to need to get in a highly efficient market at 80% clearance rate. To win 5 listings, how many listing presentations do I need to go to? Oh, well, that's probably 8. Okay, so I now need to go to a minimum of 8 listing presentations a month to win 5. Now, how many market appraisals do I need to do to go get those 8 listings? Now, this varies a lot depending upon your lead generation. Let's go with a basic number of 3 just for a bit of fun. So that's now 3 times 8. That's now 24 market appraisals that you're actually going to need to do. Now, 24 market appraisals plus the 8 listing presentations, that's 32 appointments you're going to need to break up over a 20-day work month. So if you're thinking, 5 days, Monday to Friday, you get the idea, 4 weeks. Now you start saying 32 divided by 20 work days. I'm like at a minimum of 1.5. Let's just call it 2 appointments a day. That's either a market appraisal or a listing appointment. And we're not even going to count buyer appointments right now that actually need to happen on the inside of your business. Now, if you're thinking about whatever your activities are, first up in the morning, like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11, your goal is to make sure that you've got those market appraisals or those listing presentations booked to land the numbers. And what is phenomenal is that I see people when they send through the numbers. So the first one is really thinking about results-based orientation. So listing, sales, and income actual target, and then thinking about outcomes orientation, which is buyer appointments, market appraisals, and listing appointments, and then thinking about activity orientation of how many calls did I do, or how many call sessions. That's what they now call it in the bit more modern. I just did a call session. I just did a call sesh, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And so you start saying that, but what I've got is I've got a whole heap of people in the industry focused on activities with no focus on outcomes.
No regard for outcomes. So just smash the calls, but
sure.
no actual.
And then like they booked the appointment, but the appointment cancelled, but they still count it that they booked it. So there's a problem in the fudging the figures, and then that's why it doesn't level up to the results. So often as a coach, I now go the opposite way. I look at what's actually happening in the results metrics, then what's happening in the outcomes, and then I'll wind back to some activity. And I had this guy come up to me in New Zealand a few weeks ago, and he goes, "Hey, just so you know, man, I book 10 market appraisals a day." And I'm like, "Whoa, man, that's unbelievable. It's 50 a week. That's 2,000 a year. How many did you list last year?" And he said, 2. There's a massive problem with those numbers. I said, out of the 10 that you book every day, how many actually go ahead? He goes, 9 to 9.5 cancel. So he's just like, just trying to get, I'll just come out, see it, but like and everyone's trying to find his number to call him back and say, no, don't come. And so get real about actually understanding that. But what is important is that when you build out your team, if you're doing this measurement every week to check on how many buyer appointments are they getting, how many market appraisals are they booking, how many listing appointments are they booking, it gives you better quality coaching tools. So,
and I think, Josh, it's a really great wake up call for our guys who are listening on this one to actually go back, because, like, sadly, I don't think many real estate offices across the country are actually having that conversation around the numbers that actually matter.
Yeah, sure.
Like, there's definitely a fascination in our industry about calls, and commission, like and what club you're a part of.
Yeah, sure.
So, like, if I wrote X amount of dollars, I'm part of the XYZ club, and I got a plaque for this. So we're very top line revenue focused, and awards based. But I'm not really sure that there's many companies or many individuals around the country going, okay, all right, if I do actually want to sell 80 homes next year, how many do I actually have to list? Actually, I've got to allow for a 10 or 20% fallout on that. What's my average commission?
Yeah, sure.
And then even taking it one step further, Josh, and you've got all of those numbers. Now let's actually talk about your actual lead source. Okay, rather than what you want your lead source to be, tell me about the last 100 houses you sold. And tell me exactly where did that pie graph actually break down in terms of where those listings actually came from. And now we've actually got some percentages and some metrics as to where your business actually comes from. Let's actually put some lead generation strategies in place based on facts, not on your emotions of where you would like your listings to come from.
So, Phil, I really drill into probably these three questions that I think has been the foundational piece. So I sit there and I say, hey, Phil, I'm going to ask you three very simple questions. How do you generate your leads? How do you win in the listing presentation? And how do you sell your listings? And people are like, and every single time you got flexibility, aka weakness, because you're not clear on what you do. That's a real challenge. So, okay, great. I know that if I'm going to do 5 transactions every month, I need to have a minimum of 5 opens every Saturday if I have a 28 days or less sales process. That's my minimum. If I'm not at 5 opens on a Saturday, it's a problem. When I'm in the listing presentation, my opening gambit, it's like, Phil, lovely to see you. How can I help? And I find out everything about what's going on in your world. My second question, have you already selected an agent? Oh, that's why I've got Harris here. I'd like to go with you guys. If you knew that at like minute 2, how much does it change how you go to present? And then in terms of sales process, I don't do conditional. I like dealing with cash, unconditional. So depending on your market, that might mean that it has to be auction, or in some markets, you can actually make it unconditional without having to use an auction sales process. But that's what you got to do to keep the days on market really short.
What I love about that, Josh, is just your really specific, clear intentionality. And that's what I talk to my team about. Like what you're saying, you've got total purpose. Number one is how I prospect or how I generate opportunity, right? I've got total clarity how I generate. Number 2 is you've got total specificity over this is how I list, right? Here's how I convert someone that they are commercially better off than me than going somebody else. And thirdly, here's how I take a listing and convert it into a sale. Love it.
So Phil, let's go into our final one, which is our principle today. Make sure that your marketplace is big enough for your aspirations. And I think that this probably happened. I was in a car with Alexander Phillips coming back from a breakfast one day when I first started coaching him, like 15 or 16 years ago. And that's what he said to me. And I was like, yeah, right. And it's about aspirations and thinking that. I saw a recent study by Louis Christopher, and he said 51 out of the 60 suburbs in Australia with the lowest amount of properties currently available for sale are based in Sydney. And he said that the average rate in those markets is about 0.34% of the total number of houses in that area are currently on market. And the industry average sits at about 1.2% across most markets is what's currently available at any one point in time. How important is it to know that? Because I think the industry has been fascinated with 5,000 homes or an area, so to speak, as opposed to what number actually sell every year on average in my area and what percentage of those am I going to actually need to go and hit my numbers. And I think that this has probably stemmed down from the franchising years maybe where they gave you a little bit of an area and you bought that, and then naturally the franchise owner then broke that up for salespeople and said, hey, you can have this and that. But you've got to make sure that marketplace is big enough for where you want to go.
Yeah,
right?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that, there's certain things that are like all businesses that become legacy issues, and God bless the franchise. There's some amazing franchise and some amazing offices that are out there. But reality is, I think the whole kind of farm area approach probably was born off the back of franchise, which I paid my franchise fee and I was designated, 8 suburbs, and I couldn't step outside of those suburbs because that's where the adjoining franchise was. So therefore I had to work my patch. So then on the back of that, we created a culture there everybody have 1,000 homes, you know? And if you actually dig into the data and go, actually, if out of those 1,000 homes, there's only 20 listings per year and 17 transactions per year. And the reality is if you've got 50% market share, that would probably make you a very good agent, which means that's only an opportunity of like 7 listings and 7 sales. So the marketplace isn't even big enough. But what I would say now with the modern agent, and you've got far more experience than me, Josh, in working with many agents across the country, particularly Alexander Phillips, but we've got great agents. You know, the people do it both ways inside our organisation. We've got people who are very, very good at specialising and tailoring in one suburb because the actual volume of sales and transactions is actually there. But I would say that the modern day service area or farm area, whatever you want to call it for lack of a better word, is actually our guys who just work past appraisals, past listings and past clients in this one thing we call data. Right, that's like the modern day service area, which is just dealing with a large group of people that are known to you, right? You aren't known to them. Your mobile number is in their phone, so they don't have issues in calling them and texting, all those sort of things. That to me is also the modern day farm area. So we see people doing a combination of both of that as well.
So let's get back to growth. It's time to get out there, go and make it happen. Feeling good and ready for more? Thanks for joining us
On Dream Big,
Move Fast.